If you want to increase your range, stay strong, healthy, and balanced, break through plateaus, and get your front split flat on the floor, then you've come to the right place. Today, we're going to take a complete approach to the front split. We're going to look at which muscles are involved, what exactly are they doing to hold you back from your front split. We're going to analyze how you can make this specific compound stretch work for you in your routine, why you might be rotating, why your front knee might be bent, how to fix all of these mistakes, and of course, we're going to look at some end range conditioning. With the tips provided in this video, you're going to be able to see fast initial results, break through existing plateaus, and then continue to make consistent gains until you get your front split flat on the floor and beyond. Throughout this video, we're going to look at a whole lot of exercises, in-depth progressions. They're going to help you target each part of the front split separately before then putting it back together. I've collected all of these exercises for you and put them together in a sensible and well-organized workout. If you want to get access to this workout, have a look at the description down below and download it now, or follow this link right here for a complete front split follow-along routine utilizing these stretches, which means you're going to be working out and you're going to actually understand what every single exercise is going to be doing for you. In the front split, both of your legs are extended in opposite directions, meaning both of your legs have to open up. When we look at the front split, it's mainly going to be the hamstring muscles that are holding you back. These semimembranosus, the semitendinosus, and the biceps femoris, which is the lateral part of your hamstring. The back leg is going through hip extension, which means the hip flexors at the end of the day is going to be what's holding you back. The psoas, the iliacus, and the rectus femoris. You have to work on every single one of them because at the end of the day, you're only going to be as flexible as your weakest link. Don't let one of them hang behind. Now in your front split, your shoulders and your hips should be perfectly squared. The idea is to do this front split with both knees fully extended, with no internal or external rotation in the legs. Also, your entire legs, both of them, everything should touch the floor. You also want to keep your weight right in the middle of the legs, even weight distribution, and we want to do all of this whilst minimizing the arch in the lumbar spine. Don't get me wrong. The goal, of course, is to do it with a perfectly straight back, but it's unrealistic. In the history of humanity, there's almost nobody who achieved a perfect 90-degree extension with the back leg. So almost every single person who's going to do a front split is going to arch their back a little bit. Our goal is to minimize it as much as possible. Now the front split is truly something fascinating. You see, when you're doing a middle split, you line yourself up nicely, you can push yourself down, not much can go wrong. In the front split, on the other hand, there's so much room for error and so many mistakes can and probably will happen along the way. You cannot just relax into the stretch. You have to constantly stay engaged to stabilize the position. Getting good at the front split is truly going to elevate you as an athlete. Not only because it's a great and very efficient way of stretching your hamstrings and your hip flexors, but also because you're going to develop a completely new understanding to how your body works, new levels of coordination and of body awareness. Now there's the obvious advantages. You're going to be able to tie your shoes easier. You're going to be able to take bigger steps when you're going to get from A to B so much faster. But mastering the front split will also help you in your bodyweight journey. You're going to be able to train more advanced skills such as the hollow back handstand, the presto handstand. It's going to translate directly towards your downward dog. You're going to be able to deadlift deeper or eventually learn skills such as the needle. Now our body always wants to take the route of least resistance. For most of us, our hamstrings are significantly more flexible than the hip flexors, which is why most people in their front split simply lay towards the front onto their leg. Or they will arch their back trying to come up. But you see, either of those ways, my hip flexors stay perfectly straight. Imagine this band. It represents the anterior chain of your leg, basically your hip flexor. If I flip my hips into a posterior pelvic tilt, this band goes under a lot of tension. Your hip flexor gets stretched. But as soon as I let the hips slide out towards the back, anterior pelvic tilt, this is not as tight anymore, there's a slack. And in your front split, is it exactly the same thing? When you're down here, laying towards the front, this part is in a slack. But if you're coming up here, posterior pelvic tilt, you're actively pushing this hip towards the front, which is of course much harder than what's required for a clean front split. Your hip flexor, this elastic band, is under tension. But now of course, the front leg can also be the limiting point to your front split. Most of your work is going to focus on your hip flexors because that's what's difficult to open up. But if you're working your way down into the front split and you're not able to extend that front knee, it's most likely because you're lacking either calf or hamstring, or even both of them. You have to actively work on knee extension flexibility. Focus on that, and you're going to be able to break through once again. Now, in order to increase the range of our front split, first of all, we're going to completely forget about the actual front split goal, and we're going to divide it in two, separating each leg, the front and the back leg. We're going to focus on the hamstring. Separately, we're going to focus on our hip flexors. This is going to allow you to determine your weak spots and early on, straight away, make lots of little achievements, gain flexibility and gain range. When you start training now, we want to start with a dynamic warm-up. If you pick the right dynamic warm-up exercises, your front split training is going to be easier because during the warm-up, you're already warming up the right movement patterns. A good one for that is, for example, lunges. When it now comes to stretching the front leg of your front split, we first want to see where do these muscles actually lay and where do they connect. We have the hamstring and the calf that's going to be holding you back from achieving your front split. This posterior chain of leg muscles basically attaches behind your hip and goes all the way around to the back of your big toe. So when you are now stretching this front leg, you have to make sure that your knee is fully extended, that you're dorsiflexing your foot, and that you're flipping your hips into an anterior pelvic tilt. Picture this elastic band as your muscles. If I bend the knee, slack. If I point the foot, slack. You want to put this posterior chain under pressure from every angle possible. If you neglect one part of this chain, your stretch is not going to be as effective anymore. But we don't going to just focus on the entire chain as one compound exercise. We're also going to isolate each part of the front leg separately. So I want you to do calf raises where you basically especially focus on the downward movement where you pull your heel down towards the floor in each rep. On your back, you're going to do a hamstring extensions, either with a band or even holding the leg in your hand. This is going to work well as a dynamic stretch. From here, we're going to focus more on the hamstring by doing a runner stretch. Remember, we want to have an anterior pelvic tilt with the front knee locked. And then you're going to do your runner stretch with a band around your foot. Pull your foot into dorsiflexion to now truly get the entire length of the posterior chain of your front leg. Lastly, to finish training the front leg of your front split, you're going to do knee extension to actively work locking out your knee under pressure. Now, when you're working towards your front split, most of your focus is going to be on the hip flexor. Now remember, this whole chain goes along here. So what's important is that we flip the hips into a posterior pelvic tilt. This right here is called the prep for the half split. This is a great exercise for you to build the coordination and the understanding for how to get there. Once you know what you're doing, hips and shoulders squared, hips in a posterior pelvic tilt, you now take this position and turn up the heat by pushing this hip down towards the opposite heel. Honestly, that exercise alone, the half split, is going to be pretty much everything you need in order to open up your hip flexors. We can then make this more intense by going over to the wall. You're going to bend your back knee. We're going to do a half split with the back knee bend. It's just vital that you really push your hips down towards the heel and you don't keep your glutes connected to the other heel. And look, if you want to make this stretch even more efficient, you can utilize a technique called PNF. Here's the idea. We're in a hip flexor stretch. You're going to now engage the hip flexor in an isometric way, meaning without movement. Basically, by engaging this leg, I'm pulling the knee on the floor away from the box, pulling myself out of the stretch. You're not actually coming out of the stretch, it's going to stay in your stretch. You're engaged there for 4 seconds, and you're going to relax for 6 into a deeper stretch, whilst keeping your position properly aligned. This engagement and relaxing cycle is going to help you to build more muscle connection and to allow the muscle to let go and to relax into a deeper stretch. No matter how flexible you are at the moment of watching this video, I strongly recommend to you to still do at least 1 week where you separate both parts, better 2 or 3 weeks. The more that you separate, the more that you prepare for your front split, the less problems you're going to have when we now put it all together. When it now comes to doing the actual front split, what you have to remember is that form, and especially muscle connection, this activation of the front split is significantly more important than the range of your front split. Forget getting down to the floor. For now, exclusively focus on staying clean and doing the right things. Now, when we're starting to put it all together, the first exercise that we're going to do for this is going to be weighted deep lunges. It's an exercise that you see everywhere, all over the web, and people are telling you this is going to be the only exercise you need in order to get your front split. Now, do I think it's a useful exercise? Yes, I think so. I do recommend that you do this to get started. Do I believe this exercise is actually going to help you get your front split flat on the floor? Absolutely not. It doesn't help if you load it up with more weight or you do longer steps. You eventually have to actually train your front split. But to build a general awareness and to get started with stretching both legs at the same time, as a dynamic warm-up, for example, I think this is a great stretch. The first exercise that I want you now to utilize when we're putting it all together is going to be the half split, like we prepared earlier, but with the back knee straight. You see, we're still not fully incorporating the hamstring, the front leg, but we're drastically expanding the work of the back leg. You can start by putting yoga blocks underneath your knee to get used to the position and to the alignment. But I want you to already do this right. Try to fully engage the back leg, fully straighten it out. You can use your back foot to slightly point it to push the leg into your hips to help with the posterior pelvic tilt that, as we remember from earlier, is so very important when working on the back hip. Shoulders and hips are squared. We try to push the hips down. Now naturally, as you get better at this, you're going to get rid of the yoga blocks. The idea now is that you're going to hold this with your own strength. And you're going to have to work for this. Fully lock your back knee. Push it up. Push that foot into your hips to keep your posterior pelvic tilt. Once you get good at this, you can even incorporate reps. The idea is that starting in the half split, you're pushing your hips down. You're going to extend your back knee, trying to keep your hips as low as possible. Hips or shoulders are squared, posterior pelvic tilt. Now as you engage your back knee, eventually your hips are going to come up a little bit. That's normal. On your way back down, I want you to first push your hips down and then allow the knee to go to the floor. When you go up, it's the opposite. Extend the knee as much as you can, keeping the hips down, then allow to come the hips up a bit, push the hips down, then allow the knee to bend. And then it's finally time for the real thing. I want you to grab 2 blocks. No matter how flexible you think you are right now, you're going to grab these 2 blocks to begin. They can be higher than this. They shouldn't be much lower. Trust me on this one. You're going to get into your front split position, perfectly aligned. Hips squared, shoulders squared. And I want you to take your hands and walk them back until they are just a tiny little bit in front of your hips. So you can actually give your body a chance to align itself perfectly. And only when you're sure about your position, you're going to slowly slide down towards the floor, utilizing the blocks to support yourself. This supported front split position is such a great exercise because you can monitor your position, you can make sure you're always perfectly aligned, whilst letting yourself slide down, whilst really making sure you don't put too much and not too little pressure on your front split. Stretching takes time. To allow a muscle to get longer and to get more mobile, you have to hold a stretch for a longer period of time. This supportive front split position where you put yoga blocks, pillows or anything similar underneath your hips is also a great exercise. And to be completely fair, this is the exercise how I got my front split. You line yourself up, elevate high enough that you have minimal pain, yet you're able to relax into the stretch with good form, and you can simply hang out and spend time here. You can work your way up to 4 or even 5 minutes of holding this, again making sure your hips are always squared and in a posterior pelvic tilt. You combine these 2 exercises to get used to the idea of the front split. But then eventually it is time to work your way down to the floor to basically max out. And for that, we're going to utilize an exercise that you're going to learn to love, but also hate, because it's a hard one, but it's extremely beneficial. You see, here's the thing. You're going to set yourself up in this supportive front split that we've been practicing for a while now. And we're basically going to combine this with the half split reps from earlier. Remember, it's the one where we extend the back knee. So in this position here, hips perfectly squared, lower back as straight as possible. I want you, using your hands as little as possible, to engage your back knee. Fully lock it out. As you cannot lock out the knee any further, you're going to help with the hands to get that full 100% extension. Hold it, and now relax your hands, pushing the hips down until you cannot go any further, and eventually the knee is going to relax to the floor. You extend the back knee as much as you can just with the strength of your hips. You help yourself with the arms, and you push yourself further down, keep the knee locked for as long as possible until it allows to bend. This exercise will take you to the floor. With good form, squared hips, everything great. If you take this one serious, you stay consistent, you're going to get your front split flat like you've never even imagined. Tackling the biggest problem last. By now, you know and understand a lot. So we can talk about significantly more complex problems such as why the earth is flat, how they fake the moon landing, and why your hips turn out during your front split. Keeping your hips squared is essential in your front split. There's a couple reasons for this. It is significantly easier to get down to the floor if your hips are turned out. If getting down, no matter what, is the only goal that you have, by all means, let your hips turn out, get that moment of success, celebrate, then come back here, let's get serious again. Now, the main problem of this turned out front split that it's very difficult to actually determine where you're lacking flexibility. If you're turned out, every single day training is going to be a little bit different. You don't know what you're working on, and it's going to become really, really difficult to actually monitor your progress. If you're always perfectly aligned, you know that your front split is always the same, you can actually see what brings results and what you have to work on more. Additionally, this turned out front split is not really going to translate towards any of the advanced skills. It's not going to help with your downward dog, it's not going to help with your split hollow back handstand, and it's not going to help with your needle either. Checking if your front split is well aligned is actually quite simple. There's two variations that you can do. Number one, you're going to take a broomstick or really anything similar and you simply hold it against your hips as an extension of the hip bone. If your legs are on a 90-degree angle to the stick, you're perfectly squared. If the angle is 85 or even less degrees, you know that you're slightly externally rotated. You know that your hips are starting to turn out. Another great way of checking if your front split is well aligned is bending the back knee in your front split. If you bend the knee and the foot is pointing perfectly up towards the ceiling, you're squared. But if that foot is pointing out towards the side, meaning your leg is externally rotated, you guessed it right, your hips are externally rotated. We already determined earlier that the body always takes the route of least resistance. So if your hips turn out, it's always to compensate for something that you don't have yet. This can be due to a lack of lateral hamstring mobility or due to lack of the hip flexor mobility in your back leg. Of course, a major reason why your hips might be turning out is simply that you're lacking the right muscle engagement. You have to actively pull yourself into a squared front split. Lastly, and that's a big problem in my case, it's very understandable to combine your front split and your middle split session into one workout. But if you're stretching your adductors a lot before doing your front split, you're opening your hips up in the way of external rotation. So when you combine both into one workout, it's really important that you first stretch your front split and then your middle split. Now, I truly believe one of the main limiting points of actually keeping the hips squared is simply misconception. You see, we call it sliding down into the front split, but if I'm close to the floor well aligned and I'm now sliding down, I'm letting my feet slide further away from each other, nothing but external rotation can happen. It's impossible that I stay squared. So here's what you actually have to do. Once you are close to the floor, you basically have two choices. You can either draw two marks, or you can, like me, train barefoot so your feet can't even slide. And now from here, you simply, staying squared, push your hips down. Don't let your feet slide out further. But now, unfortunately, simply making sure your feet don't slide on the floor is not going to be enough for your front split to stay squared. You have to actively pull both of your legs inside of your hips. You have to actively square yourself out. There's a couple things at play here, but two of them are the most important ones. The first one's going to be in your front leg, your hip flexor. The hip flexor reduces the distance between your rib cage and the knee, basically, right? So when I'm in my front split now, a little bit externally rotated, and I engage this hip flexor, I'm pulling this towards me. I'm squaring out. But more importantly, almost, it's going to be the back leg. You see, if I am externally rotated and I'm trying to square out, I can't because my knee is simply in the way. It's not going to allow me to move. So what I actually have to do, and this is, I found quite counterintuitive, I got to engage my glute muscle to basically lift the leg away from the floor to create space for my hips to rotate, to square out, and to come down. But as long as this knee is drastically pushing into the floor, you're not going to be able to square yourself out. You have to come up, engage, square, and then you can push down. In order to be able to do this properly, you have to actually train these muscles that are going to help you square out your hips. In the front leg, that's going to be a hip flexor. So you can train standing leg raises, for example, or you can do them on your knees. For the back leg, remember, it's the glute muscle that needs to activate. So we're going to do a little glute activation and kicks. Now, once you get sufficient at these isolation exercises, we're going to put them together into a compound exercise. We need to do specific pattern work. This means that standing up on our feet, we're going to rotate the legs inside of the hips to pull into a well-aligned front split position before then relaxing and sliding back out. We have to train this so much that it goes into complete autopilot. When we're in our front split, we don't have to focus on it as much anymore. And that's it, guys. That's all you got to know if you want to know how to train your front split, how to keep your front split perfectly squared, and how to stop having any kind of plateau. You want to train your front split about 3 times a week. You can do more, assuming that you don't get too sore. You want to make sure you're always nice and warm and that you even break a light sweat before stretching, and especially that you stay warm while you stretch. Don't push too hard and stop your stretches at mild discomfort. You shouldn't be in pain. If you're not able to talk normally in your stretch, you push too far. Also make sure you don't train legs or go for a run right after stretching your legs. You want to have at least half a day of break in between your front split session and any kind of lower body work. If you want to start stretching right away, then follow the link down below and request your free flexibility routine straight into your inbox. If you want to stretch here on YouTube with me, then follow this link and we're going to together work through the workout that we just did in a follow along style. Or if you want to learn more about the middle split, then follow this link right here. Thank you so much. Until next time, get to work.